What's up, guys? In this episode, we're installing the lift kit on our budget TJ, and we're going to make those JLU wheels fit perfectly, plus a surprise repair on a RIPP Supercharger. So let's get to work. Now, like I was saying in the last video when I was tearing this Jeep apart, you do not need spring compressors to install a lift kit on a Jeep. I worked many years at 4Drive Hardware, and never once did I use a spring compressor to put a lift kit on a Jeep. That's, TJ, XJ, Cherokee, JK, JLU. Never once did I use a spring compressor. Now on a TJ, when you're doing up to a 2.5-inch lift kit, you don't have to change control arms. So what you need to do to get these springs on is you loosen the control arms at both ends. So at the axle and at the frame, uppers and lowers. What that's going to do is allow that axle to articulate. And if you don't do that, those rubber bushings, like I said, they have memory and they don't allow it to articulate like it needs to. So loosen the bolts at both ends on the control arms, and then what you do is you jack up the opposite side of the axle that you're trying to put the spring in. You get a pry bar under that spring and you just pop it in. It's really not that hard. But if you do have an extra person there, you can always have them kind of stand on that knuckle and slide that spring in. Just that works also. But I feel like the easiest way, like I said, jack the axle up, pry bar, pop it in. So normally I would just tighten down the upper shock bolts with an impact through the inner fender well there. There's a hole that's cut out. I used that when I took the shocks off. But I was able to tighten it down with a ratchet wrench, so it just made it a little easier for me. But normally, yeah, I would use an impact and just tighten that down. I like to get the upper bushing on that shock squished about halfway. When you set it down on the ground, just make sure that upper shock's not loose, and usually that works pretty good for me. Well, I ran into a little bit of a snag here on the TJ. I was taking the rear shocks off, and by no surprise, the rear shock bolts broke. So normally how I correct that issue is I'll take an air hammer and I'll knock those factory nuts off the frame. And I'll take the inner wheel liner out there so you can get a wrench through there, and I'll just nut and bolt those rear shocks. I've normally never had any issues with that, so that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Well, I finally got the JLU wheels mounted on our TJ. This is the first time I've ever put a JLU wheel on a TJ, and I ended up just getting an 1.25" wheel spacer that went from a 5x4.5 to a 5x5 to mount this JLU wheel on a TJ. Well, unfortunately, an 1.25" is not going to work. The wheel offset on a JL wheel is at a positive 44, which that moves the mounting surface of the wheel out towards the face of the wheel. So what that does, it's pushing the wheel further in, and it caused some clearance issues with the back of the TJ. The wheel and tire are very close to rubbing the upper spring perch on the frame. So to resolve this, I went ahead and ordered an 1.5" wheel spacer. I'm not a big fan of going over an 1.25", but an 1.5" is pretty much max. I wouldn't put anything bigger on there. I've just seen them wheel spacers loosen up when you start getting, putting more strain when you start pushing that wheel out. All right, here's the wheel spacer we tried first. It was an 1.25". That did not work. We just need a little bit more clearance to make that tire and the wheel clear the rear spring perch on the frame. So we went with the 1.5", which you can definitely see a difference there. Definitely should give us enough clearance. Now, when you're installing wheel spacers, always use red Loctite on the studs. If it don't come with it, this one did come with red Loctite, but I know the first wheel spacers we got did not, so get you some red Loctite. Make sure you follow the instructions when you torque these. You do need to make sure you torque them down the spec. Another thing that I like to do, I will drive the vehicle after I have these on, drive the vehicle 500 miles, and then I will recheck the wheel spacers, make sure they didn't come loose. And then after that, I will recheck them every oil change, tire rotation, just make sure they're not coming loose. And every time I go do some hard wheeling, I do pull the wheels off and check the wheel spacers. Last year I went to Smoky Mountain Jeep Invasion. I have wheel spacers on my TJ. I drove 8.5 hours all the way to Tennessee, and at the campground I pulled the wheels off, checked the wheel spacers. They did come a little loose, not all of them. There was a couple of them that did come loose, so it's just a good thing to get in the habit of if you do have wheel spacers. Now, not everybody does that, but I have a family in the vehicle, so I like to just keep up on it. It's just a good habit to get into. So we're going to go ahead and get these on. All right, so typical, ran into a problem with the TJ, putting those wheel spacers on there. Somehow I got the wrong wheel spacers. It was supposed to be a 5x4.5 that adapted to a 5x5. What ended up being a 5x4.5 that adapted to a 5x5.5. So, 2 sets of wheel spacers that I'm going to have to send back. So hopefully the third time is a charm and I can get the right wheel spacers that are going to work for the TJ. I'm going to take a little break from the TJ. I have another Jeep that needs to get done also. It is a 2008 JLU Rubicon. Well, this Jeep has a RIPP Supercharger on it, and the back bumper I need to repaint on it. And the RIPP Supercharger needs pulleys and a belt. I already did a Supercharger service on it. So I'm going to go ahead and get these pulleys, the new belt on it, and hopefully get this rear bumper off really quick so I can get that repainted. All right, we finally got the belt on here. Got our new idler pulleys on, which RIPP Supercharger. There's two of these idler pulleys. It's hard to see the other one on this side. See if I can get in there. Yeah, it's hard to see it, but there's two of these idler pulleys. RIPP Superchargers suggest to replace those pulleys every 45,000 miles. And while you're replacing those, you might as well do the belt, because you pretty much have to kind of take this whole supercharger system off for the most part. I was able to kind of leave it on there, use the pry bar, get it out of the way to get the belt in and out, but I made it work. And also for a service, we did the RIPP Supercharger fluid service on that. I would suggest just getting in the habit of doing it every oil change, but it just takes one bottle of their synthetic fluid here. But they definitely suggest to only use their fluid. If not, it could harm the supercharger. So, but we got all this wrapped up. It's running good. Only thing is, this supercharger does have a little bit of a noise at idle, but when I talked to RIPP Supercharger, they said it's normal as long as there was no debris coming out of when I drained the fluid, which it didn't. And if the noise goes away while I'm driving, they said it's a normal condition. So we're gonna leave it at normal condition, but it drives perfectly fine, and it just has a weird noise at idle. It's hard to hear on camera, so I'm not really gonna try to put that sound out there. But if you guys hear anything different or know anything different on these about the noise, just let me know. But as of right now, I'm just going to let that go. So we're going to go ahead and get back to the back bumper and get that off here. Okay, guys, we got as far as we can on our budget TJ today. Hopefully, the wheel spacers that I just ordered will show up here soon, and they are the right ones. So hopefully in the next video, we can get this thing back on the road. We'll see. Always seems like we run into problems. But that's any build, right? But if you guys have any questions with anything I did today in this video, please leave a comment. If you have any questions about just any Jeep build in general, if I can help you out, I will definitely try. So leave a comment down below. But you guys have a good one.